Ageism is defined as discriminating, stereotyping, and prejudicing an individual solely based on a person perceived and actual chronological age. According to the Australian Human Rights Commission's, ageism can impact people at all stages of their lifespans. However, it is constantly and strongly imposed on older individuals, ties to the perception that they are the burden of society. In Australia, despite the national enactment of the Age Discrimination Act 2004, ageism continued to be a progressive oppression. A survey conducted by O'Lolan in 2017 consisted of 5,000 participants aged 18 and above, found that 46% across all age groups stated that age-based disparities are very common in Australia. The result comes from an understanding that age-based disparity are an ingrained belief that older adults are associated with a deterioration in functional health and are highly dependent and fragile. These perceptions foster ageist attitude reinforced by daily interaction and age-related offensive humor. At a structural level, a report conducted by Henrys in 2024 stated that ageism is embedded in health institutions where it fosters undertreatment and clinical neglect, directed at an older person characteristic and their care demands. Moreover, ageism is found in the workforce, such as limited opportunity for employment and hindering progression in the workplace. Overall, exposure to such discrimination is prone to impact an individual's psychological well-being and how they perceive themselves, particularly among older adults. The report conducted by the Australian Human Rights Commission identified that ageism affects every individual once they transition into older age, describing it as a prejudice against our future self, highlighting how the fear of functional decline, illnesses, and death contribute to ageist belief. The report also outlines the younger generation lacks of recognition for older adults and their roles by framing them as a frail onlooker to life, implying a passive and merely observing rather than an active participant in society. In a structural area like employments, a survey conducted by the Australian Human Rights Commission in 2023 found that 1 in 6 employers would not consider hiring a worker aged 65 and above, and 18% of human resource professionals are reluctant or not willing to recruit workers aged 50 to 64. The same report also highlights that this assumption of lacking necessary technological skill made up 22% of the obstacle that deters older workers' employability. In another survey carried out by the Australian Survey of Social Attitude in 2016, found 92% of their respondents believe that age discrimination is likely to occur in the working environment. Ageism also exists in healthcare in the form of false assumptions about the natural aging process, which contribute to the neglecting of patient condition and rehabilitation. For instance, the Royal Commission in 2021 reported the classification of back pain and depression in aged care institutions as old age condition, which failed to consider the broader context of their condition. Furthermore, assumption about a patient's cognitive capacity can lead to exclusion from staff and patient conversation. The prevalence of patient-directed discussion among staff, irrespective of intent, and the overlooking of patient privacy. Collectively, the culture of fear of aging, institutional neglect, and structural bias contribute to the rise of ageism in Australia. expanding from individual prejudice to the overlooking of worth in the area of employment and healthcare. The most immediate outcome of the oppression are self-directed ageism, which occur when an individual adopts the ageist belief about themselves. An article by Henrys in 2024 reported a consistencies in encountering negative belief corresponds to the development of persistent self-blaming for the declines in their performance compared to their younger years. Moreover, it has also raised their cognitive concern about the likelihood of being judged negatively for their age. Ageism is also structurally manifest in the field of employment. A national study conducted by O'Lurden in 2017 present that 77% of older Australian workers aged 55 and above are more likely to be redundant. 67% found themselves less likely to be promoted, and 55% faced difficulties in adapting to change in the working environment. This fosters the correlation of a worker age to the difficulties that they encounter, stemming from the age's assumption of older workers being less likely to acquire the same technical skills and inability to sufficiently acquire new information compared to younger workers. However, over 70% of Australian workers opposed to the assumption that they were less productive and less willing to work over time. These figures highlight the impacts of structural ageism on older Australian workers, contributing to limited career progression and workplace exclusion. Beyond employment, age marginalization in healthcare is also a critical outcome of ageism. The report by Henrys in 2024 reported that psychological issues such as depression were frequently overlooked, where necessary investigation and treatments were excluded due to biased normalization of older patient illness. The likelihood of being excluded from making decisions about their medical care is also faced by older cancer patients, as evidenced by their reduced probability of receiving surgeries and chemotherapy. Moreover, the overlooking of safety of older age group in residential aged care is also associated with ageism. The same, the, the same report found 27,000 to 39,000 alleged resident-on-resident physical and sexual assault incidents were at the hands of aged care staff member. However, they were overlooked, which they fails to safeguard the patient from abusive behavior by others. Such outcomes demonstrate the impacts of age-based disparities, including the failure to prevent practical harms and breaches of human rights in terms of restricting rational decision-making about their preferred medical care. The National Elder Abuse Prevalence Studies in 2021 consists of 127 older age participants, of whom 57.1% reported experiencing physical abuse, where 60.7% were in the form of threatening, intentional abusive behavior such as shoving, grabbing, or pushing accounts for 46.6% and 22.3% for being punched, kicked, or slapped. The same report also outlines the likelihood of older adults encountering sexual abuse, notably a 76.5% of incidents are found in verbal form and 32.2% of physical act against one will. As well, the study found psychological abuse in the form of insults accounts for 49% and 46.4% for the exclusion and neglect in social activities. In responding to the oppression, only 36% of the respondents sought helps from informal avenues such as friends and family. Personal barriers that contributed to the underreporting were also noted, including shame, embarrassment, self-blame, and low self-esteem that deters them from disclosing their experience with abusive behavior. However, the same report found that their participants described further action as ineffective, with 32% for physical abuse, 22% for sexual abuse, and 48% for psychological abuse. Therefore, understanding how age-based disparities influence the perpetuation of silence around elder abuse, as well as the institutional mistreatment of older adults, is critical. This insight supports the development of necessary policies and intervention that address the systemic inequality to promote older individual recognition and protection, and to provide a foundation for a just and fair society.